Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 181 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we're going to work on making logistics robots. Enjoy. And it's certainly making lots of sulfuric acid requests. Kind of curious if the factory can even keep up with this. We might actually consume all of our sulfur here. I mean, it's trying. We've certainly got a lot of it in stockpiled in machines here. And it's doing alright. Oh, the train delivered and it's gone already. So doing pretty good. Let's make sure these depots are set correctly. Yep. Intermediates depot. And there's a delivery of lead. Don't have the resources to build the locomotive right here, but it shouldn't matter. We can build it anywhere and then send it down there, and then it will become available. So let's put that concept to the test. Of course, I put it on the wrong side of the track, so that's why I can't find anything. Where's our intermediates load and then load 1? Well, let's send it to the depot. Because it should be intermediates, unload 1. And yet another sulfuric acid train. I'm actually kind of surprised at how quickly it's going through that. I mean, that one train is good enough, but probably wouldn't be if we were doing other stuff too. Doesn't have very far to go though, but I guess trains never have very far to go because they move so fast. It's actually, I feel like it's falling behind a little bit. Well, no. I think that's just how quickly it consumes it. We need a radar in there. That's unfortunate. There we go. Now we have sight. Also, what about those robot brains? Well, it's stationary. Does that mean everything's good? We got our 600, 600, 600, 600, and yeah. Looks like all of the components are ready. Well, it's a good thing we have our third depot here, because now we need to make our request for those batteries. I don't know if I need to keep putting these warning signals in here, but oh well. The moment I stop putting them in there is when there's going to be a problem, and I'll need them again. So we don't need any of this stuff. Batteries, negative 512. In the battery network. Is this name correct? Yep. Should be good. Let's turn that on and see if the request works. Let's see. No train. Let's see, I wonder if this is not turned on right here, this depot. I believe that is the case because they're all green. And depot trains should be blue here. Yep. Let's put those on the correct network. Let's back this up a little bit. Intermediates depot is on there, but it's -1. I think that's just means everything, and it takes a moment. There we go. To upgrade. I have those settings fairly slow for lag reasons. Let's make sure this dynamic station worked. It should. Just had to change a few settings here, but that's kind of the point of the dynamic station is you don't have to change too much, it'll just work. Certainly seems like it is so far. Might as well stay here and make sure it leaves properly. It's interesting that the request was 32,004. It has lock slots per wagon as 1. But oh, I bet I know why. Because these wagons actually have 6 slots on them, but the request was for 4. So because of the way the lock slot worked and all that, it just rounded up. So let's see if it stops when it's supposed to. And it does. Looking good. Of course, the train will get there much faster than I can. Or maybe not. I think it just barely won, and I had the short path too. But there it goes. The batteries are now here. Okay, let's work on all these robots. We need to do both the robots and the components. But because of the way this works and how they go into each other, this is a prime candidate for bots to move things around rather than doing direct insertion, because of how interconnected they all are. Well, the first thing we need are the bots themselves. Then we can go from there. Let's start with the logistics robots. And the tier 2 requires tier 1, both of which require their frames. Let's just set this to 1 per second. We'll worry about that number in a bit. Make sure those requests are still happening. And they are. See, it says there's no plastic, but is that just because it's running low? Yeah, pretty much. We're definitely nuking our plastic. It's probably hurting our power production, but it looks like we're keeping up for now. So we did set up our brains to be 1 per second. So we should probably set up the robots to do the same thing. So there's a lot going on here. But we need to do 2 sets of robots, 2 sets of frames, then the robot tools, which should probably go in the other side. And I'm thinking of direct insertion with this stuff, but robots would make it easier. Hence why I want to get the robots going, so any future setup can be simpler. And then from that, we just have all of the basic parts. So steel bearings, gears, motors, batteries, of course the brains. See, to make this simpler, let's cut this stuff out and just do the individual tiers out here. And see what kind of quantity of machines we need here. Well, as far as the flying frames are concerned, looks like we're going to need quite a few machines for that, because they can take productivity modules. But the primary machines do not, and they're so slow that efficiency modules will work just fine. So the setups making the frames are going to be reasonably large, but it could just be everything being put on a belt feeding a single machine here. And the tools, I guess a little large. Can't direct insert them. It should work okay. Let me try to theory craft a little bit here. Don't really have too much cleared space right now for this. And the robots are at the other section we were just working on. So I kind of don't want to go over there and get them. But we do have nanobots. We're so close to having robots to do all this stuff automatically. But we're going to have the 2 machines in the middle actually making the robots and feeding into each other. So the tier 1 making the tier 2. And then they'll drop into the chest. And then we need the frames, the tools, and the brains. Well, the 2 frame setups are fairly large. And they don't feed into each other. We don't really need that many of them. So perhaps a single belt will work fine. Just to have 1 on each side. And the same applies for the tools. Which can be done like this. So the tool machines would be going up there. The frame machines would be going up there somewhere. Then we'd have a space in here for the brains to come down. let's do the 2 frames. Gotta chop the coils, but it doesn't need much machine for that. On either side, really. And the numbers are very similar. So there's just a single coil chopper at the bottom, and then 36 machines going up. And since we need quite a few of them, we might want to double them up. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, so that should be 15 of them. Yeah, that would be a reasonable size to double. And we're actually pounding our way through that sulfur. We don't have a surplus of it anymore, but I'm sure that'll change once we've caught up with all these batteries. Let's make it look nice and symmetrical. And then that output can go up. We'll combine it with this belt, because now we need to do the same thing for the tier 1 frames. And it's very similar. We can actually kind of combine everything on this one belt here. It's gonna be a little tricky, but it should work. But instead, this one's got to be steel. And switch these over. Let's see, this might be easier to do if we convert these to near side. That way, when the output comes through here, it can just kind of go right there, filling up the one side. Then those frames can go down. We'll want these set to near, so they continue to go on the correct side. And then we'll have our mixture of frames right here, which is this part of this. They have no unnecessary frames. Could do something like that, which will send the frames down here for this one. Then they have their input of robot brains, which comes from way up there somewhere, which can be injected there. And that can be for the tools, although we can use this again if we want to put this over here. To make sure the correct brains go to where they need to go and there's no extras. And we can do something similar with the tools here too. I know it's kind of a lot of zigzaggedy belts just to keep a few unnecessary items from sitting around on a belt, but whatever, it's technically more efficient. Okay, and these just need efficiency modules because they're so slow. And now we need the tools. Let's see if we can keep the setup the same in style as the other side, where we have the aluminum chopper. Resources can probably come in right there. And then the tool makers right here. We don't need very high throughput, so just the one belt works. And I'll put a near and far inserter on here just to fill up the belt, because otherwise it would be a half a belt, which would look weird. And this other input would be the other items, and they can be ejected on either side of the belt. But let's see what the red tools look like. Pretty similar. Less machines though. So there's the output. which can come in there, inject on one side. These machines will inject on the other, so only blue ones will make it down here to get picked up. And I think that does it. The only other component are the brains, which would come up through here. And from a drone, preferably one that's not too far away. See, no plastic. Is it just slow? Kind of. It's only a yellow belt. But I think that's because our production rate's actually like 9 per second, so a yellow is technically fine. It's just taking a long time to clear out. It might be better to make that a red, though, for throughput reasons, but let's see. Probably be best to make the robots up here, because then we can have the drones, because they'll have a fairly short path, but they could deliver the brains, which would come straight down on this belt here. Not too much. I mean, it's smaller than it could have been. But that's what we need to make robots. And want to try to line it up with the other machines. The best we can, anyway. Put a few gaps in there. And plop it there. See, while we're down here picking up some roads for the drones, let's convert that plastic output to red belt. And hopefully that'll help the train a little bit, just having less warnings. And we're still going to run out of it. Just kind of hurts a little bit knowing we've got so much plastic in here, but we can't use it because the belt is too slow. There we go, that ought to help a little bit. And to minimize the amount of brains that are just sitting on a belt, let's have the drones send it as close as reasonably possible. So we'll just have a drone path go right here. And since we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, we'll probably want to reuse another fueling stop here. So let's put our 2 requests in here. I believe they have to be separate depots because they're making requests. A supply depot can have more than one, but I think the requests have to be separate. Where it's brain number 1 and brain number 2. And a single drone for each ought to work okay. But we need some fuel drones as well. Put the drones in there, and then we'll have to wait for the fuel to get here. Which looks like it's coming from over here. So it's being sent from this one right here. So doesn't have quite as far to go. But nonetheless, that's where the brains will come in. Let's just cut them off here, so we can inject them when we're ready to see how it works. We need some logic here. Let's just say if there's less than 50 drones, put some in there. And then this one works a little differently, because this is actually going to be a supply chest for the whole network. So we'll need some batteries for that, and we'll just handcraft it for now. Man, look at that. That's so much copper. Well, it's a good thing we're about to be automating all of this. And then we'll probably want an interface as well, so we can control the inserter. So we turn that into a robo chest, which has lots of places for bots to go. Then this logistics interface, which we can plop right next to it. And let's make a decider combinator. Well, by default, X is the number of available logistics bots. So let's say if there's less than 100 available ones, then output a green square. And since there's no signal, it outputs the square. And this one can be waiting for said square. And actually, it looks like the brains got here. So now just everything needs to get hooked up. I think that's all the resources here. So we can start testing it out. First, let's check all the coil choppers. Okay, let's check the tools. Make sure those get made all right. Seems to be going pretty good. Looks like the tools are in their proper locations and aren't getting super messed up or anything. Alright, let's distribute the motors. We'll set this to read robot statistics. Available logistics bots is X. Probably don't need to read the contents. But motors are pretty much distributed. So let's just shoot in the other parts. Batteries and circuit boards. And these machines are quite slow as well. There we go. Now we're making some frames, which come through here. The blue ones go by. The red ones go by as well. But the red ones from the other line come in and join on the correct side. Meanwhile, these ones are being made and injected on the near side. And any red frames get sent to this machine. And the blue frames go down here. Which it looks like it still needs to have an inserter. Let's just have it one space down so it's not fighting or anything. So if everything's good, yep, we should only be requiring the brains. And of course the lower tier of robot, but that part's looking good. And we got lots of green here. It's a lot of output, but it's only for one robot a second. It seems to be okay. Well, I guess it's time to see if this all works. There's a lot of the factory been dedicated to this, but let's see if we can make some automatic robots. Seems like it. Of course, these machines are much faster than their surrounding components. And they can't take productivity modules. But that's all there was to it. And now we're getting a signal out. And we're waiting for available bots to be more than 100. And now that we do, it shuts off. And there we go. We've got some logistics robots. Fantastic. Of course, they don't do anything without the logistics zones to expand their function. And this is where things get really complicated. And having bots can make this a lot simpler. So let's just look at the final components that we need. I don't know how many logistics zone interfaces we'd actually need, but we might as well make them. We're at the point in the factory where we kind of want to make everything. So let's make a new line here. And we'll direct insert what we can. Perhaps the final component. So we want the big set of charge ports, the tier 2s, which come from the tier 1s. We probably want to compute this by factory. Just say one machine, and we'll see what it all looks like later. But we want to make the small ports as well. And those can be direct inserted. We need to make the expanders, which come from the previous tier. And we need the robo chests themselves, which can be direct inserted. Probably don't necessarily need to make them from a steel chest here, because we also need to start making the chests. We don't have access to the buffer chest yet. That's actually locked behind the pink science. So we won't be able to make use of the active providers and the buffers. But we can make use of requesters and providers. And the storage chest, which will be for items that otherwise don't have a different chest to go into. So we need to make those 3. So we need to make passive provider and a requester. And we need to make the storage chest as well. I think that's most of what we need here. So we'll have some direct insertion going on, like these machines going into each other, but there's also a lot of random parts being made. So instead of having to have belts and inserters and everything, we can just make these basic components and go from there. And none of those machines can use productivity modules, so they should probably just use efficiency. This isn't really a situation where we're going to need to make a bunch of units really fast. So speed's not important either. So then we need to make the base components, like the charge ports here, but we don't even need to worry about linking any of this stuff because the rate of all of this is going to be fairly slow. And luckily these intermediates can use productivities. And we can use these. I just don't think we're going to be expanding so aggressively that this all needs to be some kind of perfect ratio. I'm just using these numbers to make sure we get everything. So we've got the charging pads, and then we need the antenna arrays, and we need the hatch doors. And yeah, the great thing about robots is that none of this needs to be particularly well matched with each other. We just want to make sure we're including everything. Then let the robots move everything around. And we need some chests too. Chests aren't exactly something that's going to be moved around on the bus, and there's kind of no point in sending robots from one side of the bus to the other just to move some chests around. So let's make those here as well. Just the one machine. And it can't have productivities or anything. So there we go. We have a bunch of random items in here. Is it balanced in the slightest? No, but it doesn't need to be. You can also see how, like, the circuits requirement is just insane. Like, that's never going to get met. But it's not supposed to. We're going to need some chopping machines. And we'll just have the one machine with the productivities doing all the chopping and say that that's good enough. Certainly we can throw more machines in there if we need to. Now we're down to our base resources. And since we don't want to produce more than is necessary, let's just link this based on the required output there, since we actually need less cable than this. Otherwise, for everything else, we'll still have shortages. But that's fine. Okay, we have what you might call a setup here. Making things with bots is certainly much different than making strictly with belts. But that's going to have to wait till the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.